So let me show a little bit of what we had to do to prepare for the conference and what it was like. Because if you haven't been to Toorcamp, it looks like evidence suggests it is usually every other year. So it's like every 2 years that it happens. So, if you want to get started planning for it now, now's the time. So my strategy going into this was noodles and diffusers. I wanted to create a giant noodle that was diffused, that was beautiful. So I ordered these white pool noodles off of like walmart.com because you can't find them anywhere in stores. Like they just don't have white pool noodles. So these diffuse light perfectly. And my plan was to make a gigantic tower that would guide everyone around the camp, like a landmark that would let people navigate through an area that's maybe otherwise just a bunch of tents. So this was my vision for the Space Noodle. We also tried to pack up everything we needed, including power cables, and almost packed the cat a number of times. This was another idea. This is actually from BitLooney on YouTube. This is a 3D print that allows you to wrap NeoPixels around and actually put ping pong balls on the outside to create these really cool looking lamps. On the way there, this got completely melted because I printed it in black PLA+. So as a result, when I got to the conference, it was all misshapen and did not look so great. So RIP to this idea, but it was pretty cool. And you can actually make this out of paper as well. All right, so in order to get to the island, you have to go on a ferry. And being on the front of this ferry was incredibly cool. It was very beautiful. The islands are incredible. San Juan Island and the San Juan Islands in particular are just like really, really gorgeous, although quite rainy. So on the first day, we were attacked by these caterpillars, which would explode into goo if you touched them in any way. And they were crawling over everything and generally making themselves a nuisance. So these were by far the most prominent character of the entire camp. In order to get from part to part in camp, you would walk through these areas that were lit with these beautiful, like glowing, multicolored LEDs. So different parts of the camp were connected together in a way that made it super fun to walk between the active parts of the camp and find where people had set up. You can see our former co-host, Michael, here hunting for Sasquatch at the camp. He was here helping us direct classes. So if you wonder what Michael's been up to, well, he's been going also to camps with us and setting up all sorts of cool stuff. So we saw a lot of stuff there. This robot was one of my favorites. She was beautiful, and she was often DJing or otherwise playing music. But she was great. I think she had like spoons for fingers or something. So I tried to mimic that vibe, and this was our tent. We had a geisha mask from Ghost in the Shell that was lit up internally. And then going inside, we had a space that was set up for people to come by, learn. And of course, everything was lit up with LEDs, which lasted not that long, actually, considering the power was going out constantly. So Millways was an organization that was there and was hosting dance and karaoke parties. And they had these cool chandeliers with all these nonsense IoT light bulbs in it, which I had to say were pretty funny. And I'm going to probably steal. And then we, at night, put up a shower curtain liner and projected patterns onto it. So the noodle you can see is here being diffused. So basically, this is a shot of the shower curtain with the projected patterns on it. And then the noodle, the space noodle, as I called it, kind of like emerging from behind and also diffusing on the back of this shower curtain. So we created a pretty cool display, I have to say. In the children's section, our good friend Michael did in fact put us right in the middle of like the kids camp kind of area. So we were mostly putting on these crazy displays for a bunch of children who really appreciated it, but continually interacted with things and sometimes broke them. Although they were very cute and we didn't mind. So this is what the space noodle looked like from the other side. You can just see it is a big, prominent noodle that towers over everything else. There were safety concerns over making this noodle any taller, but we got it to like at least 20 feet tall. So kudos to the noodle, of course. This is the main dome for Toorcamp. This is where a lot of the workshops were happening. And as you can see, they were projecting onto it. They had like projection mapping going. So our whole shower curtain thing was nice, I guess. But when compared to a whole geodesic dome that also had like projections and graphics on it, it was not maybe as impressive. So more impressive was people just doing random stuff like this. So I got to see the emergence of some of the largest bubbles I've ever seen in my life. Have to say, it was pretty incredible. Question from James. Oops, I clicked on the wrong one. I'm going to highlight you, James. How do you manage powering all of your gear? So at Toorcamp, there's no power guarantee. They do a best effort to run power, but it is sketchy, and we popped the breaker over and over and over. Neighbors were accusing each other of ground faults, and all other sorts of things were happening. Every time we plugged anything in, it ended up eventually causing either a short or somebody accusing it of causing a short. So all of our tents were connected on the same power grid, and we were the only ones that brought a power spike. So we were running the Noodle, which I considered to be a public service for people navigating at night. But we were also running other things like this professional bubble machine I got for $10 at Goodwill. So as a result, like there was a good amount of cooperation. A lot of electrical engineers came in and introduced themselves and tried to DIY solutions to get everyone power. But it was quite a thing to get power out here. Some people ran generators, but not too many. Most people just relied on the fact that power would be intermittent. And then a couple of them also had solar panels. So in the future, I'm going to bring, I think, probably solar panels and a large battery for our individual camp stuff, because we really didn't use that much power. It was just the Noodle and then the lights inside our camp, and that was just about it. But because so many other people were doing crazy stuff, you know, it meant that it was a little harder to get power consistently. So this was the night market, and this is where we got to trade a lot of those broken or lightly busted nuggets for all sorts of other random stuff, as I showed earlier. So it was a dome that then led into a whole bunch of tents that had all this interesting and cool stuff, a lot of blinky stuff, a lot of stickers, a lot of other things being traded for either sometimes real bucks, but often also what they called shady bucks. And you can see there was a lot of like projection mapping going on here as well. They really did an amazing job with making these tents look like super engaging and immersive. So while I feel like I made a pretty good showing with the shower curtain, like perhaps I could have done better, and I will do better next year. So this is the legendary drone taco delivery service. I think the procedure is it goes down and you have to take the taco out of it and then give them a thumbs up to let them know that it's been retrieved. Oh, you can see the drone gets pulled a little bit. There's the taco. You show it, everybody cheers, and then the drone goes away. Under the best of circumstances, this drone got trapped in a tree not long after this video, and everybody had to rescue it. And the rescue strategy was to fly a smaller drone into the tree repeatedly to chop it up and eventually crash the smaller drone into the larger drone, which caused them both to tumble out of the tree. I say that kind of deridingly, but it actually worked, so I can't argue with the results. When we came back from teaching our class, the kids had discovered our bubble machine and were going absolutely crazy. I've never seen kids be more excited. And they started putting their faces directly in front of the bubble machine and eating them. So we eventually told the parents that they could turn off the bubble machine whenever they wanted to. And when we left, this was the scene. When we came back, there was a 4-foot pile of bubbles and the bubble machine was exhausted. So I don't even... Oh, this is bureaucracy. Okay. So one of the things that's a hallmark of Toorcamp is kind of like silly society. Like they basically make like versions of society that you have to do in order to interact with certain parts of the camp. So this was bureaucracy, and this is the equivalent of the DMV, the bureaucracy, where these people are filling out forms to get a teeny tiny little cup of beer after going through a whole application process to become citizens. So bureaucracy citizens have to go through a lot of paperwork, and that's kind of the point. But there was also things like Shady Bucks. So this is my Shady Bucks card. This is an actual debit card that you have to get embossed and set up, and it has digital currency on it. Cryptocurrency, some might say. So apparently last camp, somebody figured out how to exploit this and created infinite Shady Bucks and ended up kind of cornering the economy. I don't think that they managed to this year, but they did warn us that that could happen. And you have to go to the ShadyTel carrier service in order to set this up. So there was phone service run to all the camps, so you could call anybody on like a rotary phone or like just like a normal plug-in phone. Was all connected via a phone service called ShadyTel. So these sorts of bureaucracies and like fake like telecoms or whatever that actually work was kind of cool. It was like a performance where people were emulating parts of real society, but in a way that was constantly failing. So the ShadyTel people were always fixing power failures, trying to find out why their equipment wasn't working, and trying to run a real phone network out in the middle of nowhere. And creating infrastructure from nothing, including Shady Bucks, was a pretty cool experience. This was one of the workshops that I got to teach. It was a hex leaf class where we put together these hex leaf lamps, although we also made a bunch of smart Pusheen cat lamps as well. But they all came out really well. The people who made them were extremely happy. This is a fun and low-cost project that I've been bringing to a bunch of different workshops. And if you have access to a 3D printer, I highly recommend this one. The way they came out was just awesome. When we got back, this was the scene. The bubble machine had run out of bubbles and created a massive pile of bubbles that the kids were throwing themselves into. The kids also had a stomachache because they kept eating bubbles. So we took the bubble machine offline for a while, and at night we saw people doing whatever this is. We saw like glow up kites. We saw a bunch of people spinning whatever that is, and then of course lots of bubbles. So this was another night in the night market. Of course, you can see my trademark noodles here, and people all over were trading things and had all sorts of cool and interesting stuff. So as somebody who works in marketing, I'm also very interested in how people are able to attract attention, what kind of stuff like shows up and does really well. So this was a bunch of resin cast stuff. All of these were actually, you could learn how to make these resin cast things at workshops at the camp. So they had the finished result and then also the class that let you learn how to make them yourselves. We had a lot of glowy and blinky things. These ones were 3D printed and had some like blinky stuff integrated into them. And then just generally the night market was just, as you can see, a blinky bazaar where people were buying, trading, and selling, often not using real currency, which was totally fine. There was also some pop-up art installations. This was just a game you could play, this big egg just in a field. So not really much context there. Somebody just kept setting it up, and it had an uninterruptible power supply. So even if it got unplugged, the egg game just kept playing. What is this place? Yeah, so this is Toorcamp. It is located in the San Juan Islands. It happens every 2 years, and it's a hacker camp that's styled after the C3 conference, Chaos Communication Congress in Germany, and also some of the camps out there in Europe as well, like EMF. These are very, very similar. They're basically a hacker conference, but with all the infrastructure removed, so you bring the infrastructure. It's pretty cool. It basically, oh yes, and then of course, one of the final manifestations of the Space Noodle, my personal project to allow drunk people stumbling back to their dark tents through the night to be able to navigate safely through the camp. So this was another one of our workshops, a solder your own hacking tool workshop. We got a lot of people who soldered for their very first time at this camp. And of course, there was a Pride parade as it was the last day of Pride, and a lot of furries. A good sign of health of a conference to see a bunch of furries. So I saw some of the best some of the best stickers I've seen. A lot of, again, gigantic bubbles. And then finally, we got the bubble machine up for one last hurrah before the kids flipped it over and shorted out the power for the entire camp. Somebody also made a stamp in a stamp making workshop of our nugget. So they gave us the stamp and then also the result from the stamp. It was super cute. So a lot of people really touched us while we were teaching, like either people that really enjoyed what they were learning, people who had learned to solder for the first time, or people that took our Wi-Fi self-defense class and really enjoyed it. After on the last day, there was a cool little dance party. And oh, wow, they really clocked me on that last one. It was direct eye contact. And then we had to head back. So aside from having our cars not start on the ferry, it was a relatively uneventful trip home until we got to Seattle, where we got to see the Pride Parade and gay robots. Don't really know a lot of context behind these, but love to see the LGBT robots. These appear not to be battle bots. They are harmless basketball tossing bots. But either way, it was nice to see, after coming off the island, a continuation of all the cool, colorful nerds and electronics. So that was most of our trip to Toorcamp. And again, if you haven't heard of it, I'm not really surprised. It isn't a very well-promoted place, I would say. And when we first saw the camp, I was confused. I thought like, okay, it didn't happen last year. Maybe it's not active anymore. But it turns out this is an extremely long-running camp. It actually does have a lot of people that go to it very regularly. And the only reason that I thought it was dead was because it happens every other year. So I was like, okay, well, now I know. So if you're looking for a great place to check out, Toorcamp is amazing. And I have to say, there were so many kids here and people with kids. So if you're a parent and you're looking for like a camp for your kids to go to that has a lot of just like delightful stuff, electronics, like blinky stuff, like, and even some cybersecurity things, we met some incredibly smart kids who the camp was basically made for. So I didn't expect this to be such a kid-friendly camp, but it really was. And teaching kids about cybersecurity and electronics was incredible. So also a big shout out for Veronis for letting me take the time to go to this camp. I love teaching people, and getting to do this outreach is honestly the best part of my job. So yeah, anyway,